Hi, my name is James Andrella, and you're listening to the Back to Human podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the soul. A little bit more specific, we are going to be talking about what is referred to as the muscle of the soul, even though it is much, much more than just that, as we are about to find out. So we're going to be talking about the psoas. And on the show with me today, I have Liz Koch. Liz has 43 years of experience working with the psoas. She is an international teacher, the creator of Core Awareness, and also the author of the Psoas Book. Without further ado, Liz, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, James. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. So I want to learn a little bit about how you got introduced to working with the psoas. What is the history there?
So the brief history is I was a conceptual artist at the Boston Museum School of Fine Arts, and I recognized that movement has a lot to do with creativity. And when I discovered that in myself, it was like, I need to find somebody who knows more about this. I didn't want to learn a dance technique. I wanted to explore somatically, which wasn't a word we used at that time, but there was the concept of human potential. What is human potential? So somebody recommended Bob Cooley. And Bob Cooley is the genius of flexibility. He's actively teaching, has 2 studios in Boston and Santa Barbara. He's phenomenal. But in the moment that I met him, he was focused on the psoas. He came out of a dance background, a movements background, and he recognized that all injuries, the source of the injury is always found in the core of the being. And he wanted to understand this tissue called psoas. So I spent 3 years with him, really somatically parsing out these intricate aspects. First of all, how do you even access your psoas? That kind of thing. And then I moved out to California, and he recommended that I start a little group so I could continue the work I was doing. I did, and that blew up into my work. And I continued with the psoas, and he went on to what is known as resistance stretching.
Resistance stretching. So it's like just lengthening the tissue under load?
He's so more than that. He's 3-dimensional in his work. He's dynamic in his understanding of milking the meridian flows, in which you really actually have to have resistance to take the myofascia patterns out of your body so you are more capable. He works with, Olympic athletes. He works with CEOs. He works with Harvard professors. He works with, actors. He works with people who really want to show up in themselves fully. Mm-hmm. He's a phenomenal person. It's a big world. It's his world. You have to kind of enter and, dive in and be in Bob's world. But he and I have always, stayed friends and colleagues. And so that's how I learned about the psoas.
So with the resistance, that's really interesting there. Just a lot of what you said. So with the resistance, a passive approach generally isn't going to always be ideal. It's almost like you need to go into it. Things aren't just going to happen on their own. And with the injuries, what he believed stemming, or was it the hara, where injuries come from the core, like they'll have a foundational element stemming from, would it be either a weak core, a dysfunctional core, or elaborate a little bit more on that?
Parse that out, because Bob and I work very differently. Mm-hmm. He's a man, I'm a woman. That changes everything. Okay, it really does in terms of approaches. So as I went deeper and deeper, and he would honor me as the Queen of Psoas. I really spent a lot of time understanding. And a book that you bring up the title of is called Hara. And it is the Japanese, the translation here in America was written by a German man, so who knows? But I have had an opportunity to speak to someone who actually reads Japanese and is a somatic educator. So he and I have had this discussion. But Hara means the center of gravity in our world. It means where all the cardinal planes enter your field, where you as a cosmic being on the earth are receiving information from all the cardinal planes, meaning these, front to back, side to side, top to bottom. Okay, that is your hara. And it's theoretically located about an inch behind your navel and sometimes slightly lower. It's kind of where you land in yourself. And psoas, in an embryological model, which is the model I use, and I think it's an important model to use if you want to understand psoas. You can't really understand psoas in the functional movement world because they use anatomy, and I don't. I use embryology. It's very, very different. So embryology is a living system. It's a living process. It's what we're constantly doing. We're constantly unfolding. We don't stop being an embryo. We actually are like the tree and the seed. We are still unfolding, and we unfold throughout our lives. And we return. And that is why Taoist healers call the psoas the muscle of the soul. This is that center of being that where all forces come together. And certainly the heart also plays a huge piece because the heart is the largest oscillator of the body. So it's not like you only have one center, as we know, there's multiple centers. But in terms of movement, one of the places that has been so foundational is landing in the core, the ignition of your own being. Some of that has to do with how you arrived here and what got awakened on your journey here, and what didn't. And so that's the hara. And the heart is more of our longing. How do we show up here? What do we long for? What do we actually want? Who are we, And psoas is between those two centers. And it speaks a lot. The upper psoas and lower psoas are different, but the upper psoas really speaks to our strategies of showing up here, of how to come be in our center, show up in our longing, and all the forces of culture, society, family, religion, education that we have had to strategize around. Because we're not wild animals, right? Stalking Wild Psoas is about, people say, why did you use the word stalking? And I say, because it is a form of stalking. We think stalking is always that we're the victim of stalking, rather than the perpetrator. But I am actually interested in this dynamic of how can I fully show up here before I die? Can I totally arrive here on Earth?
I like how you say that because just even with myself, speaking for myself alone, I feel like to a certain age, I guess, I feel like I'm a late bloomer, but I know that there came a time when I felt like I needed to express myself in a different way, which is why I'm now doing something like the podcast. And I feel like a lot of people are not showing up as their full potential, or they're not able to fully express themselves. And I feel like this has a lot to do with the psoas and also footwear. I know that you mentioned it in your book, Psoas Book. I was just reading it this morning again too. And I do a lot of barefoot training. So when I look at footwear, I see name brand footwear. They're not the shape of our feet. Our feet are now taking the shape of shoes, and they have these large heel lifts, which ever so slightly, even though it's like very, very subtle, it shifts our center of gravity. So our hara, if hopefully I pronounced that correctly, is now kind of distorted. And we are not, the way that I see things, especially with the images that you have in your book, and you consider the psoas a pendulum, I feel like we are not able to get into that full swing of things. We're kind of stuck somewhere in the middle. And it has
I like 100% with you.
Yeah, I've been chasing this for quite some time now. So I started barefoot training maybe about 4 years ago, and it absolutely changed my life. I know people are probably like, it's just shoes, man. It's just your feet. And people consider the foot kind of just one thing. They put it in a shoe, and now it just becomes this one piece of your body, and we kind of neglect it. Meanwhile, it's got all these joints, it's got all these ligaments, it's got all these muscles, these tendons, attachments. It's like, it's a lot more than just one thing. So I've been chasing it for some time now. When I see the center of gravity changes and some of the work that I've done, I kind of just intuitively started getting into the constructive rest position, which I'll let you elaborate in after this. But I found myself in the morning, especially after having a kid, when I was kind of knocked off my center, just getting into this constructive rest position and then intuitively doing the exact exercise that you have in this book. And while doing so, I started to realize that, holy crap, I'm walking better. Like the way that I'm stepping through the world, through this space, I feel so much more confident, so much more powerful, so much taller, even though I'm 5'8" on a good day. I don't know what a good day would typically be, but I just felt taller. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what the heck I just did, because there is something going on here. And then that's how I stumbled across your work. So that's why I really wanted to have you on the show. So with just that center of gravity shift, something as simple as the footwear, which people are completely just unaware of, what is happening? I know that's such a broad question, but
now you can speak to this. So there's a couple pieces that what you're speaking to, I think, needs to be addressed. One is this concept, which I call the mechanical concept, in which we think of ourselves as an object, whether that's your foot or your psoas or whatever. And that's a mechanical model. It's looking at body as object, individuated, and separate from and unrelated to the Earth's atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So that's the issue of getting back to human, is to be able to actually land here on Earth and show up here as an earthly being. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you actually have to realize you are shaped by gravity. Gravity isn't something that just pulls you to the ground. It actually rebounds you and shapes your being. So if you can't actually show up in gravity, how are you showing up in your life? You can't. And as something as simple as a shoe plays a huge part, especially in the very beginning. It always does. But, so from the very beginning, there's something shaping you. Children who are only on wood or some kind of floor, that's not the ground. That, they don't land on the earth. We used to land on the earth. Somebody actually brought you to the earth and placed you there. Or your mother was crowning and you landed in hands that were connected to the earth. That is missing. And so people are disoriented. Mm-hmm. So when we're trying to recover our relationship with the earth and the power of the earth to shape us and allow us, when you say, I'm a late bloomer, I would say, think of the trees that, and the plants that only blossom every 100 years. Mm-hmm. Are they late bloomers?
No, it's their time.
Like they're not. We all show up here, but how do we get to show up here? What is what nourishes us and allows us to flourish? That is what all my work is about. And so shoes. Okay, I agree. Here's the reason. One is the transition between your foot and your spine is, as we said, like a pendulum. It's actually from the heart that goes to the foot in terms of connective tissue and energetic. But even in a very practical one, if I can't sense my bones, I can't feel the earth. Mm-hmm. Two, if I can't move my ankle joint, I can't shift weight. That's what you're talking about, moving through. That's the moving through. That's the moving from somewhere. We're stuck in a place, and we call that good posture, but it's actually, there's no movement there, right? Mm-hmm. We're not an object, we're a living process. So this transition between the vertical and the horizontal is found in the ankle joint. And so one, it's bone, and two, it's proprioception. And when we have good proprioception, we are getting information not only through us that lands on the ground, so we say, here I am, orientation, landing, but we get locating through the fluidity of what I call ecolocators. Joints are ecolocators. They're not just range of motion. They give us information proprioceptively about where we are, what's happening. The wild animal whose joints aren't moving as food for somebody else. Mm-hmm. They're not going to survive. So this shift between what happens in the foot and what happens to the psoas and the bones Psoas is always telling you, it's like, get over yourself, like quite literally, get over. Because if you're not over yourself, I'm in up for telling you, you are not going to survive. And so people want to release and palpate and do all kinds of things to psoas. It's not there. It's just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. That's as simple as it gets. So yes, the shoe that you're wearing distorts the foot, or it commands the foot to be more educated in which walking that is in the foot, but it's not. We are spine-based organisms. We walk from the center of our being, and then it lands in the foot, and then it rebounds back up. And the conversation is about how do we stay in a relationship with gravity that fully informs us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to actually walk without our psoas, because the psoas, for those that don't know, that aren't really familiar with anatomy, the psoas is actually what connects your spine to your legs. If it wasn't for that, you really wouldn't have any locomotion. Or go ahead.
Maybe even a little differently than that. There is Serge Graviovskis, who's a researcher, worked with a man who had no legs. And he walked across campus. So we have to rethink ourselves as human organisms. As an embryological model, you have a center of, we call it a cell, right? There's this round, there's this something that shows up, and we utilize that to become. And when the cells divide and multiply, they circle around or organize themselves around what's called a midline. Mm-hmm. The midline's not a line, it's a field of gravitational field, even in your mother's belly. Okay, there's your own center. You have a center of being, like the earth has a north and south pole. Mm-hmm. Your mother has hers, the earth has hers. But we're all actually have our own center. What we want is that alignment all through that dynamic, ideally, so we're supported on every level. When that embryo starts to organize, long before there's organs and bones and blood vessels and all the other parts of our being that we've dissected, we are coming into relationship to our own axis, our own north and south pole. This is where the Tandien, the Hara, plays a part. That's the navel. That is where all nourishment is coming in to organize around this field. And the heart and the brain become these kind of like jellyfish, so everything is being shaped by the fluids that we are. We are a fluid organism. We are a spine-based organism. So everything comes from the spine. But not the spine we think of the central nervous system, but the actual axis. And then inside that axis, we have a notochord. We have, what we think of as the primal brain, which is where psoas lives in the animal body. But then we have the cortex and the developmental of the brain that we have in our head that has different parts of it that do different things. The mammalian brain, the cortex, where we're so focused now as humans about machinery, and the frontal lobe. So we've lost contact with this animal body. So to become human, we have to access all of our brain, all of our brains, all of those centers of being. It's not one or the other. And in fact, being focused on the front brain limits us tremendously, as you know. So the minute you put a shoe on your body, you are actually, what you are noticing, and your instincts to get on the floor and play in this way is more of the animal body. It's going into the back in what we think of as instincts, or we think of as intuition. That is horror in many ways. We're really reading gut brain. We're reading animal body. We're reading the primal reptilian body. We are being informed by what you could call millions of intelligent life on Earth. You're accessing something so much greater than the front lobe.
Or you should, anyways, if I'm hearing you correctly, because we're operating out of this front brain.
You can't. If we didn't have an animal body, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So far, I can say that.
I feel like, but the access, what you're talking about, seems like it's stagnant, and those messages that should be going along our spine are, again, distorted. They're not very coherent because we don't really have this alignment. And you mentioned, let me see if I can pull it up.
called the spinal engine.
Spinal engine?
The spinal engine. And what he was studying was this, and this changed. Okay, so the reason I'm bringing it up is that, years ago when I wrote the Psoas book in the 80s, I had a certain understanding, and each time, and I have a book in between Stalking Wild and the Psoas called Core Awareness. And so each book and each conceptual jump that I made was this growth of understanding body in a different way, right? I had good instincts. I had a good kind of sense of everybody goes into constructive rest when they're injured. If you have a back pain, you end up on the floor with your knees up and your feet on the floor. You don't know why, but there you are, right? A place you can hang out for a while, that feels okay, So we all end up there, but it had somebody called it something, constructive rest. So something is happening there, and what's happening there is gravity is bringing you to the earth. In other words, when you're in that position, at a horizontal position, gravity releases extraneous excitation out of your psoas, which was so, right on. You just had this incredible experience of bringing a human being to the earth, and you just land on the earth and let it happen, and what it's doing, it's taking out what psoas is a messenger. When someone's psoas has been misused, overused, and abused, then you've been misusing it. You've been using it for something else. Maybe it's a ligament. Maybe it's it's your fear. It's disrupted. It doesn't need releasing. It needs to be recognized that you don't use the psoas. Mm-hmm. And that's why mechanical models don't work, because we use everything in everything has a purpose. Yeah. The psoas is a field of energy. It's very fluid, and it's reading this central channel. Okay, what in Chinese medicine is called your conception and governing vessel. It's reading an energetic field. It's not actually meant to be a hip flexor or a core stabilizer. So when I read about this man who had no legs, which nobody would want, he was a birth defect where he has no arms or legs. Think of the longing of this child who would be able to long so much to go up into the vertical stance that it could move through space. What would it take a human being, the kind of desire, the kind of impulse, right, to do that? But what it teaches us is that we are spine-based organisms who then grew arms and legs as our evolutionary event. We don't walk with our legs. We walk with that longing that's inside of us that moves us through space. Mm-hmm. We don't walk, and that's why what you're speaking to of walking on the earth, not just cement, Yeah. Like literally being on the earth, feeling its rhythms, feeling its impulses. This is how we regain our relationship with our animal body.
Makes sense. And it's a kind of difficult concept, even for myself, to see the psoas as something other than a muscle, because one of the go-to things, I have a psoas, or not a psoas, a pso-rite, which would be in order to release the psoas for those that aren't aware of it. And that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all. And it's kind of like we're stuck in this model where even some type of massage could be really painful. And we're told that you kind of just need to get these knots out, and it's like a quick fix, but sometimes a quick fix is not really what you need. And something as simple as gravity, I'm not sure how long it would take people to really see some resolution if they were to go into constructive rest, how long it would take gravity to kind of just weigh them down and kind of bring them back to their center, bring them back to earth, bring them back to being a human being instead of a human doing, because we're so focused on this front brain. But yeah, I was curious, what do you think about the pso-rites or having manual manipulation of the psoas during some type of massage? Because it doesn't feel good.
I'm very opposed to it. Do not shoot the messenger. Mm-hmm. The psoas is not the problem. So now you're beating it up. And I've had these conversations with literally thousands of people. Because that is the mechanical model. If I have a problem, I need to fix it. And so if I think my psoas is short, or is restricted in some way or knotted up, then I'm going to go to somebody who's going to fix this psoas. Or I'm told there's something wrong with your psoas. This is the problem. This is your psoas. Let me get in there with my elbow or my finger or this machine or whatever it is, and we'll see what happens. Think of it the other way around. If your psoas is a messenger and you shoot it, then it can't really tell you that something else is what it's. So we have to ask the question, what is it messaging?
Yeah, what's going wrong in the first place?
Okay, and one is that I don't know where my bones are. Okay, I don't have enough sensory. It's called proprioception. Proprioception is a word that basically said, I have an internal sensory system that gives me information through my skeletal system, a sense of wholeness and a sense of relationship to earth. If I'm not in my bones, I can't feel the earth in the same way, because the earth vibrates at a frequency and bone registers at that frequency. And so they match. So you're actually physically here when you ground. So that's one piece. The next piece is we have strategized how to show up here. So we learn to control our emotions, our impulses, our whatever through the cultural belief system that we live in. So in many ways, we're looking at an organism that hasn't been nourished in a way that it can really blossom into being itself, right? It's not. We want you to be something else. We want you to be educated and education only happens in this room looking at this thing. It doesn't happen out in the world. It's like our whole structures do not allow us to flourish. That's not the purpose of society. Mm-hmm. And so we have these disruptions. We also have injuries and things that happen to us where, one of the things the psoas messages is SI joint dysfunction, sacroiliac joint, tears in those ligaments, because those ligaments protect the joints that give us ecolocators. So all of a sudden I have injuries and the psoas is saying, stop doing what you're doing and go fix the injury. Mm-hmm. It's basically telling us something is disrupted. Kind of like your GPS system, like when you're just going the wrong way, it keeps saying, you can turn around, you can change here, go down this street, come back to where you were going. That's kind of how the psoas is working. It is literally talking about our soul. And mechanics don't have a soul. No, in mechanical model, there is no center of being. There's only doing. All tissue from your spine forward flexes, all tissue from your spine back extends. There is no core of being. Mm-hmm. So when you shift the model to recognizing that you are an orbital being, psoas is this fluid tissue like a juicy cucumber, you don't want to use it. The reason why it's considered a hip flexor or a core stabilizer is because in the mechanical model, everything is compartmentalized because it's based on dead tissue. Cadavers are cut up and we say, this goes in this box, this goes in that box, this all looks the same. And remember, when anatomy started, it was cadavers that were in formaldehyde. There was no connective tissue. Now that we have the research and the 20 years of exploring connective tissue, still people are just beginning to understand this idea, the layman of like, what are we talking about? What is connective tissue? Where is it? It's a matrix of being, and it's a fluid matrix. And psoas is filet mignon. It's the juiciest cut of meat we eat in an animal, a mammal. Why? Because it's fluid and supple, and it kind of dissolves in your mouth, and it kind of dissolves on the plate. And if you're a vegetarian, think peeled, juicy cucumbers. Okay, all right? So if yours is hard and rigid and tight, then it's not short. It doesn't need to be stretched. It's exhausted. Okay. There's no such thing. But what we're also talking about is the actual dryness in the psoas. So whether it's muscularized, whether it's over-muscularized, whether it's, in other words, the capacity of the psoas is really speaking to the adrenals, because all organs are in front of your psoas and your adrenals literally float on them. So if your upper psoas, between your diaphragm and your upper psoas, is dry, hard, tight, all of a sudden you're looking at your adrenals and your kidneys as being riding on a rigid board rather than something floating and keeping them really nurtured. And the adrenals are connected to the very bottom of your foot. It's kidney energy. It's kidney 1. It's right at the top of where we think of as arch, I think of as a diaphragm. It's right there in the center of your foot. It is that moment of every step you take is either nourishing those adrenals or you're trudging through something and exhausting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So they see, the indigenous cultures that could go miles over mountains, right? As having, their shoe is flexible. Their ability was to rebound. Their ability was to keep their weight over themselves. The foot wasn't way out. They weren't striding. They were literally using ground to keep nourishing them so they could keep moving and not be thoroughly exhausted at the end of that. We strive, and so we go beyond ourselves rather than inside ourselves.
It's a lot to take in, but it makes total sense to me. And since I've been doing this barefoot training for years now, I'll go out on hikes, and I don't get tired at all. And I do believe it has a lot to do with the footwear. So I'm so glad that you're touching a little bit more on that, because our center of gravity just shifts ever so slightly, as I mentioned before. And then our psoas is forced to become this hip flexor, which it's not really meant to be doing, according to you. Yeah. So now it gets used, abused, and it's not short or tightened as the mechanical model would have you believe, which, I mean, when I went to exercise science, that's what I learned, that it's just a muscle. But we actually don't know what our tissues are doing as living tissues. We could only ponder, but it's probably so much more. So with the footwear, center of gravity shifted, and our psoas being used as a hip flexor, it's becoming exhausted, and it doesn't have that opportunity to lengthen or go to the other side of the pendulum, which, talking to you, I would say it doesn't have the opportunity to rest. So now we see that people are chronically in this state of like anxiety, this fight or flight mode. So you tying in the adrenals would make a little bit of sense, where everyone's cortisol is going to go up. Their adrenaline is going to be chronically elevated, even if it's just very, very subtle. But it's almost as in we're in this chronic state of falling forward when we wear this footwear with the heel lift, and it shifts us forward and our body has to compensate. So we're chronically falling forward. And I know that you said the psoas in your book is related to the fear response.
Yes, it's the autonomic nervous system. In other words, you don't want to control your fear responses. You want them to be accurate. So if I'm in a room by myself and I'm in constructive rest and I'm shaking and I'm overwhelmed, that's not a nervous system that's responding to the moment. But if I'm, so I can't read the moment then. So that creates more fear responses, because if I have a level of tension in my system that can't, I'd literally jump out of the position, and then I go, the phone didn't ring, nobody's at the door, what am I afraid of? Mm-hmm. And then as I stayed there, I began, and no, you don't want to stay in constructive rest until you actually arrive. You want to do it in small amounts. You start out maybe 5 or 10 minutes and you roll over, get up, move around, maybe you come back again, you spend that. And at some point, maybe you spend up to about 20 minutes. But I don't think you need to spend a lot of time, because where you really want to be able to go is into primal movements, which allow the organism to go through restorative gestures. But to take it back to the foot, because of the shoe, what I want in a shoe, which is what you're kind of looking at, is if I'm in the city, I might want a different shoe than if I'm on ground, because when I'm on ground, I'm picking up the earth itself. When I'm in a city and I'm on cement, that I need something that has a little more resilient in the bottom, so I get rebound, because the cement doesn't give me that, and stone and ground does, earth does. Okay, so there is a little variation. If I'm doing certain, climbing or whatever I'm doing, there's different shoes, right? But what the standard idea is that the shoe is flexible, can fold in half. It's got room for all the toes. It doesn't have a very intense lance, meaning that when you turn the shoe over, it has a more neutral lance, which means the shoe's not trying to correct me. I cannot correct my posture through the shoe, nor can I do my psoas through some instrument. I actually have to come from the inside out. Does it take a long time? Not necessarily. It just depends on where you are and how resilient you are and, you know, what you want to do. So it's a gestalt. When it shows up, it shows up. And, you know, until then, there's things that it's telling you. And psoas, you can listen to psoas. You can listen to the cues of what psoas is telling you about. So the heel piece that you're bringing in, I would say that you're right on. And the difference is that I actually think that most shoes, especially a shoe that drops in the back of the heel, throws you back behind gravity, not over gravity. But the actual piece that's even more important, because some people, a little tiny neutral heel or tiny up, not a lot, but a little bit in the back heel, can remember to fall because psoas is part of your falling response. So you actually want to fall. You don't want to use your legs to move your spine. You want your whole body to move through space. So it's also what it does to your ankle. If it ties your ankle too tight, if it doesn't like the talus to move, if the talus is shoved back into the heel, you're locked in that position. So, you know, people need footwork. You're saying, you know, like look at your foot with all the ligaments and all the joints. Work with that. Work with the talus of moving it. Work with the ankle to be able to dorsal flex. If it can't dorsal flex, you can't get over yourself. You can't find that axis. That you can't locate. And once you locate, I'll tell you what the impression is for pretty much every human being I've worked with: vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And that to me is what we are. As human beings, we are vulnerable. So when you touch on that and you actually play in there, then you even trust the earth more, because the earth is actually what's providing you with your food, with your air, with everything you need to thrive. So if we think we can be separate from it, I think we have something to learn about that.
It's amazing. And the vulnerability piece that you just mentioned right there. So with that fall, where we're kind of like falling forward, or with the heel lift, how we can't get into dorsiflexion, or we can't get over ourselves. I love how you keep mentioning that. We can't get over ourselves. So we can't be vulnerable. We can't really express ourselves because part of the fear response, falling, would cause us to want to like curl up into like a little ball.
You bring something really important, the difference between shifting weight and falling. So if we think of a willow tree moving, that's shifting weight, okay? Mm-hmm. The tree's still rooted, right? But it's shifting weight. If we're a rolling ball, you know, snowball down the, you know, that's a different impulse. So psoas talks about both. It's always talking about the axis. That's all it cares about. Okay, it doesn't care about what you think. It doesn't care about your social relations. It doesn't care about any of it. It just talks about, are you in your core integrity or are you not? You know, you can do whatever you want, but are you in your core integrity? It's all about the midline. It's all about the axis. Okay, that's what it's reading. That's why it's global. It's reading back body, front body, side body, top body, bottom body. It's reading the hara. It's like saying, you know, what's, you know, either that is in tune with the earth or something's not okay. And we should pay attention to it because I'm telling you, you know, something's wrong. That's what psoas is saying. So don't beat me up, you know, don't palpate me and, you know, that, you know, don't torture me. You know, it's not going to make a better psoas. And all the people who say, oh, I got a little relief. My question is, how long did it last? Yeah, okay, because that's ultimately what we're talking about. So I think shifting, the shoe is very important. Absolutely. But this idea of falling brings us to something else that's at least to touch on, which is this is out of the realm of functional movement. So psoas in the functional world, in my functional world, is a messenger. It's just constantly informing me. And so I'm not using it to survive. I'm actually reading it to survive, okay? In the biological world, it's about falling and survival responses. So when I fall out of a tree or I trip and start rolling down that hill, my body is going to go into a fetal curl. If it doesn't, when I fall out of the tree, I splat.
Mm-hmm.
And I, don't get to tell the story much about what happened to me, right? It's about survival. I want my body to curl like a caterpillar. So one of the ways to think about the core of the being is that it's very much like a caterpillar. It's very much that if you poke it, it will curl. It has certain responses that are beyond, it really doesn't care what you think. It's just reading the earth, right? It's just like, this is the truth of the matter. Here we are.
This is where you're at.
Yeah. So we want that fall, okay? Because if you do trip, you want your body to roll up. Well, if you're using your psoas as a stabilizer, your chances of rolling, your spine becoming supple enough, your responsiveness, you probably see in your young child Maro reflexes, that kind of startle response. Yeah. Right. That is a vestibular. That's a proprioceptive response. It happens both through sound, because the vestibular system's in your inner ear. So if something loud happens, they'll startle. Mm-hmm. But it's also, if you shift weight, it will have that response, because the vestibular system is our other, it's part of our proprioception. Every joint and these perceptions tell us about our relationship with Earth. And so along with the fetal curl, or what's actually called in embryology, the primal C, which is the shape we came in on, this journey, is the warding off, or we think of as arcing, or getting bigger. Now, in embryology, these two expressions are innate. And there's an embryologist named Jaap van der Wal, who came out of retirement to start teaching body workers and people that they have to change the paradigm and get out of the mechanical model. And he would say, you utilize cells to become. He's a scientist. He's an embryologist. He's a professor. He worked with Olympic athletes for 10 years. I mean, who says that? We utilize cells to become. I mean, that suggests that there's something else about us that's happening here. Mm-hmm. And he would say, that there are gestures to the embryo. So when he studies embryology, he says the human embryo rises up against falling apart. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So gravity, what does it do? You land here and then something comes up and you rise up and you run, or you move, or as humans, there's a lot of research about, like, when did we show up on two legs? When did we really rise up against falling apart? Okay. But it also indicates that we're always dissolving and we're always reappearing. That if you look at living models, biodynamic living models, we're always dissolved, we're always composting, and we're always returning. Mm-hmm. And so if we try to create a core that's rigid, that doesn't change, that is, we lose a resiliency and capacity to adapt and respond and grow and really flourish in our lives. So I play with these primal gestures, what he calls gestures, and I found them in my own body. And when I got to sit at his kitchen table in the Netherlands, I said, I've never known anybody who understood what I'm experiencing, because I would have these impulses to curl up, right? And instead of saying, no, don't do that, straighten up, get your shoulders back, I started to follow them. I started to stalk or track my own biological organism. And as I would track it, I realized that it brings me through restorative gestures that allow me to show up more and healthier, more functional, with more capacity. So in, 50 years, if you take 50 years away from my life, I'm more functional now than I was in my 20s. Now, do I have other things in terms of, changes in rhythms? And so, absolutely. But in terms of back pain or, I didn't even know I could change back pain. Mm. Right? You just kind of say, well, you have to live with it. That knee injury, you got to live with it. Just get over it, And no, your system keeps changing. And so, like the nutritional pieces and the being outside and the living life, the quality of water, all these qualities that you bring into your coaching and your education are essential pieces of allowing the system to show up, to allowing the biological dynamic aggression to show up.
Mm-hmm. As it should, ideally.
As if the same cells we had,
Yeah.
Our whole organism is different within 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
So my question is always is, why do I keep looking like me? Then we get into morphic fields, and that takes us into a whole nother realm of physics and biology. But just to say, changing the paradigm from the mechanical to the biological, which I think is right up right up in the area. You are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That shifts, that's the cutting edge to me of what's happening right now, because the old model doesn't serve us. It has limitations. The best piece is, though, if you allow some biological responses in your body to occur, these gestures, these expressions, and actually track them, what it does is it makes for better functional movement.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, you have this sense of like, oh, I'm actually not over you actually start picking up certain responses.
Yep.
Yeah, and you start like going, oh, but what if I do that? To me, it's a creative process. So you can see my relationship to being a conceptual artist. It's like, oh, this is how you really become creative. This is how you make choices that serve you in a different way. It's like all of a sudden you get inspired, which is breath, right?
Breath. I do want to touch on breath, because that's also another component that I was doing with my CRP practice in the morning.
Wow.
So I love that you mentioned how you don't deal with any back pain or knee pain anymore. You don't need to accept that to any of the people that are listening to this. Even going into old age, these things may be quote unquote normal. I'll use air quotes for that. But it's more so that they're just common because of the old system that we have kind of become addicted to. And if it was up to me, I think we should leave that in the past. So it seems like with some of the movements that you would go into, like the fetal position, that C curve, is you were allowing yourself to just complete the motion. So if we have this chronic falling state that we feel like we're in, well, the psoas acting as a hip flexor, and going back to actually how you mentioned the caterpillar, I love the analogy. You wrote that in the PDF that you sent me, where if you poke on one side of the caterpillar, then the other side, we're all one connective web.
Yes.
Tissue. It's not just a bicep, it's not a tricep, it's one big web of connective tissue. So if you have something that is distorting your center of gravity and it's making your psoas act like a hip flexor, that's also going to go upstream. So as a coach, I've done certifications like functional range and conditioning, like working with cars and such, mobility. And as a coach, it's kind of difficult sometimes because you'll get people that have a cluster of problems. So it's like, where do you start? Now, where I personally start is with the breath. Now, I know there is attachments, connective tissue within the psoas and the diaphragm. And one of the things that I would do is, what I believe is, because of this whole distorted center of gravity that we have and the psoas becoming a hip flexor, I think it also keeps people in this chronic state of inhalation, where it's very difficult to get a full exhale, or at least this is what I've experienced and what I've seen with some of my clients as well. So it kind of messes with your rib cage and the dynamics of your diaphragm. And if I can just go woo-woo with this, it kind of makes it difficult for you to let things go. So with the CRP, the constructive rest position, what I would do is I would do an inhale. I would hold that for 7 seconds, a maximal inhale. I'd want my rib cage to expand. And then I would follow that with a maximal exhale. And I would do an isometric there at the end, holding that for 7 seconds. And I feel like both of these things combined, along with the exercises where I was kind of extending my legs and allowing my psoas to release, really just helped recenter me. So I was curious, do you think you can work, how would I put this? Because all the tissue is connected, it's all going to affect each other. So do you necessarily have to work at the psoas to begin with, or can you go the route of the diaphragm, fixing that? Because they're all going to kind of work with each other. I'm sorry for going off on a rant there, but what's the relationship between the diaphragm and the psoas? Let's keep it simple.
Let me answer first the first question, which is that you don't go after the psoas.
So
You go after the bones. You want to find your skeletal system. That can be bone tapping, that can be constructive rest, that can be working with your ankle joint, to get a dorsal flexion. There's some very functional things you can do to activate your proprioception. So you go after proprioception because your psoas reads two things: your nervous system, if you're going to parse it, okay? It's the whole system that's being read, but if you want to take it into a more simplistic way of thinking, it's reading your relationship with bone and your relationship with your nervous system. So it's reading those two things. It's telling you, that something, it's reading those two. So you don't go for the psoas, you go for what it's messaging. And it's messaging, you don't know where your bones are. You have no idea where the earth is and you're disoriented, okay? Which is terrifying. Mm-hmm. Primal part of us. Yeah. Okay, so there you go. So that's part of it. So we don't go there. So then, but we might notice these movements that show up, like the fetal curl. Like, I just want to curl up, and let your body rock. Do some long exhales like you're talking about. You'd be surprised if you actually pause, because that's where the magic happens. Is all of a sudden your organism starts to change. It starts to move. It starts to, like the caterpillar, it comes out of the curl. So that's one of them. Hydration is another, hydrating psoas, because if you have a dry psoas, you're going to have to do some hydrating. I tend to use soft inflatable balls. I have videos that I show, how simple it is, how small and micro movements it is. But hydration is not just what we drink, it's movement. It's these primal, these subtle little wave motions, you could call them, like little undulations, little wave motions. Think of people who live and do dance in various cultures near the ocean. They're always imitating little fish motions, little lateral sea motions, their spine is fluid looking. Go to Africa and look at the men. Their spine is fluid. Look at the northern hemisphere man. It's a solid, rigid spine. That caterpillar is, when you see a caterpillar that dry, that caterpillar is almost dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about our cultural belief system, right? And what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do, that kind of thing. But, when you look at the spine as a living tail to tongue, as like something, you can call it a snake, you can call it whatever you want, it has to move. So hydration pieces are a big piece of opening connective tissue, of allowing bone to float, because the floating bone in connective tissue is what's reading the earth's sphere and information. It's not a rigid system. It's a fluid system, because everything is fluid. Anything alive is a fluid system. So we're drying out, trying to be strong, whereas strength isn't density, it's resiliency. So we all have to hydrate, okay? And when people say, well, does that mean drink more water? No, and I'm talking about micro movements. And that's an exploration for people to kind of, go on my website or, start looking at some of the systems that allow that to happen. And I do a lot of podcasts on that kind of stuff as well. But the piece about regenerative movement, like how the breath fits in, is that if we're looking at a living system, we don't breathe, we are breathed. I'll say it again. We don't breathe, we are breathed. All tissue breathes, cells breathe. We don't breathe ourselves, we're not mitochondria, but the mitochondria breathes those cells. It exchanges oxygen. Like our whole system is being breathed by the earth. We don't know that because we've been objectified. We've been isolated. We've been in some room separate from other mammals. Like we've been born not on the earth. I mean, we're like, we have no idea what we are. We're lost in space, quite literally. So what I think you're doing when you play those kind of breath games is you're interrupting the sequence of our thinking, this is breath. Whatever we habitually have been doing by doing rhythms, doing singing, doing, counting, we are interrupting the cortex control, the top-down model over the organism. We're interrupting it. We're like, oh, we're going to do it different right in this moment. It's play. Think of it as play. Because all of a sudden you just do something. It's like, oh, wait, we're scrambled. Everything scrambles. So our habitual breathing patterns are disrupted.
Yeah.
But when we really go into it, one of the things I'd like you to play with and let me know what you think is if you're in constructive rest and you get an inflatable ball and you pretty much, put it down pretty low, but you just to put it right under that diaphragm on the back side, that is for most people where psoas and diaphragm meet. And I would say no one inserted anything, everything emerged out of the midline. Because, if somebody inserts your psoas into the 12th thoracic vertebrae, don't you want to go back to the manufacturer and say, what the fuck did you, excuse me, I'm not supposed to.
Go for it.
In here, could you fix this thing? That's our mindset, right? There's something wrong here. Could you fix it? Mm-hmm. So when you start realizing everything's growing out of there and something, like you say, is distorted there, right? Is disrupted there. And you start playing with the breath, you start noticing your system going into other rhythms, going into not being habitually breathing a certain way, which could go all the way back to your first breath. Mm-hmm. The first moment you said, oh, this is what breath is. There's an assumption there. To all the ways we've controlled our emotions, because if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Or, how does one do that? The threats. You see, we're right in that territory. We're in what's called the audacity of the gallbladder. We're right in it's either you show up like we want you to, or I'm going to show up how I truly am. That takes a lot of audacity. Mm-hmm. So you're actually working with people who have compensated, who have had to strategize how to get to this place in time and space. Mm-hmm. This is the best I could do. Here I am, and this is how I've done it. But look, I survived. Mm-hmm. So you got to give them credit for that. Whatever strategy we come up with, we're still here. It's worked. But now what do we want? We want something more. So if you place a ball there and you play with the long exhale you're talking about, but I would suggest playing first with that kind of warding off position of which you're using the ball to slightly arc the spine right at the diaphragm psoas relationship, but you're giving the kidneys something behind it. So you're not just bridged, you've got something. Yeah, it's just soft but not imposing. And you play with a hiss like a snake, and you play with it as forcefully as you can. So you take it into the emptying of the exhale, right? So it's an exhale, but a forced exhale. Mm-hmm. And you try to make it as long as you can, so you don't give it up. And then you let go. Your organism will start to respond. And it could do lots of things. It could curl up in fetal curl. It could go more into warding. It could say, boy, that's the best thing I've ever done. It could say, I really felt exposed. I didn't like it. It's going to go through whatever it's going to go through. And you're just going to let it go through that, But if you do that a few times, and then you take the ball away, and you just come into constructive rest again, your spine will start to find a wave motion. And it will move from the tail, think of, the lion's tail, all the way up to its tongue and eyes and ears and the way it expresses itself. And we know when that swishing tail is moving, there's an expression that matches it at the other end, not humans, but animals. Mm-hmm. Their tail and their tongue, their face are in harmony. We are not, we smile when we're angry. We're very confused, we're very few, strange creature. So, but once you do that, you start to wake up all the diaphragm like a jellyfish, and it'll start to move down through the core, and it'll massage all the organs. And it's, you could call it a piston if you want to go mechanical, but it's not. It's a jellyfish. It moves in a dynamic way, and it creates hydration and massaging all the organs and the spine and the autonomic nervous system, the central nervous system. And it starts to bring the organism back to life. Yes, the wild animal it is. And are we going to, we're terrified of the wild. You know, we think we're going to do something that's out of control. And actually, we're just actually going to show up.
Mm. It's pretty profound. And I'm definitely going to try that one out.
Yeah, play with it.
But with all the connections that are right there at like T12, I believe, as you said. So you have the solar plexus, you have the diaphragm, you have the traps that would actually come out the opposite side, and the psoas there. It's almost like that's like your starting point. It's like,
I would say the reason why it is true. I spend a lot of time there. But, you know, being in constructive rest first for a little while and just getting in your feet, like finding your feet. So going back to how important the feet are, you know, and for some people, their legs will fall out, they'll fall in, they can't stay, they want to use muscle tension. That means you don't know where your bones are, because bones just, you know, it's like a jackknife that's just finds a balance. It's like there is. So put some little sandbags on your feet or something on your feet that helps you ground. You know, it's giving you information. I don't know where my feet are. And some of it's the relationship of the foot to the butt. You know, we want it so the whole foot is felt solid on the ground. And so, but like just landing first. Then noticing, what are the impulses? Do I want to roll over and curl up? If you do it some and see what shows up, you know, and then if you want to arch, you know, like, God, I want to, you know, I really want to get big, you know, then go big, because that's what organisms do. They get smaller and they get bigger. They ward off in both ways. An animal will get smaller if the ceiling's falling, you want to either jump up and run out of the room, or you want to curl and protect. And that's what a curl does. A curl creates a spine that's resilient. It gives you back head so that your eyes and ears and nose and mouth aren't damaged, or your soft spots along your organs aren't. So it's a survival response. You want responsive survival responses. People are, I want to get rid of my fear. No, you actually want your fear, but you want it accurate in this moment so that you can really know without thinking how to respond.
mm-hmm. A little bit more control over your body. So you're saying, like, if people's legs or bones are falling out to the side, would you say that's like a lack of control, or just like a lack of awareness to what their body's actually doing?
So, for example, if you have dominant quads, which you were talking about, like the hip flexors, you know, if you've, you know, maybe you're an athlete, maybe you, you know, you're a bodybuilder, whatever, and you've over dominated the quads as the main kind of thing. They need to hydrate. They need to have some method of hydration. So connective tissue. So it's more responsive tissue. You have to realize that people who are really, really strong have really good proprioception. Mm-hmm. That's what power is. Power is the nervous system's capacity to be accurate. If you've got too much density in tissue, it's not the size, it's the density, then you can't get good firing through the nervous system. It's compressed. The muscle is too dense around the nerves. So you're not getting good neurological responses. But it also means you don't know where your bone is under that meat. And so bone tapping, literally going up and down the femur bone with your fist, not in a bruising way, but like finding bone. Like think of you're beating it like a drum, like you're finding the rhythm of bone. And when you can get into bone, I mean, that's why indigenous cultures used drums, because to message all the way across the continent, because we were picking it up in our bones. Just like the wild animal knows that the elephants on the other side of the mountain are doing something, you know, having a heyday over there. They're picking information up with their bones. So if our paws are not on the ground and we can't feel things through our bones, we are not able to feel as safe and as organized. So it's not control over, it's capacity from within. Mm-hmm. What we've been trained is you control everything through your mind, but your cortex is limited in its understanding. You turn towards your sensory system, and then the kinesthetic sensory system becomes an incredible breadth of information that you're receiving of knowing. You just know things. You just knew to get in constructive rest. You didn't say, I don't know, why am I doing this? What? Yeah, you just did it. And then the next thing you know, you go, oh, wow, this really helped me feel, calmer and, more centered and more capable of dealing with this little tiny bubble that, does all kinds of things that I can't control, which is a baby, infant, an infant or child, it's, it's out of our control in many ways. And yet it needs to co-regulate on us. So the way we develop our nervous system, because that's the other piece of psoas, is that mammals co-regulate. Stephen Porges, who's the researcher on the vagus nerve that's so popular that everybody wants to control their vagus nerve, so now you can do this or that to control your vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, we just want to control everything. Mm-hmm. We co-regulate with the earth. And so all mammals co-regulate. That means when an infant arrives here on earth, it needs to be on a body. Bodies co-regulate other bodies. When we are adults and we never had that, or even the earth, for anybody, we go to the earth, we go to that tree, we put our sphenoid to the tree, we put our navel to the tree, and we just stand there and look like an idiot. And, people tell you you're a tree hugger. You know what you're doing? You're regulating your central nervous system with a tree that goes much deeper into the earth and much further up in the sky. It is like an immediate magnet, and it takes you into this moment in this time and nowhere else. Mm-hmm. So we co-regulate. And so that's the kind of thing you're doing even in constructive rest. You're co-regulating. You're not trying to control. You're actually trying to show up in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Us idiots will be around a lot longer and with a lot less knee and back pain for doing the things that we do. So I'd rather co-regulate and look really, really weird than having those issues.
Kids do. We all did this as children. That's the thing we have to remember. We played with our proprioception. We played upside down. We swung. We rolled down hills. We played in gravity, and we loved it. We loved to spin. We love to swing. We did all these things. And then somebody said, stop doing that and focus. It was really a cultural disruption. We all have it. We all have it. And so play is really, there's a little video I just put up about me rolling down a hill. I think rolling down hills is a great way to allow your vestibular system to really come into harmony, because that's a place that's a lot of disruption. What do we do with our eyes looking at our phones, or we're looking down at the ground when we're walking rather than the head being in relationship to the horizon? Because that's one of the places, the ankle and the head, help us find gravitational field.
It's all related. The whole body's connected. You can't really pinpoint just one thing.
No, you can't.
I'm really curious what we've been kind of detached from. It's very vague, but I feel like we do definitely have a much higher potential than what we've currently been living. I feel like we've been robbed of a real fun experience. And like you said, someone just said, stop playing. It's like, I don't want to stop playing. I feel like that's how I stay so youthful.
That's right.
I have fun. I have fun doing all the little stupid stuff that everyone else thinks is weird, but whatever. So we've been talking about the constructive rest position a lot. I don't think if we actually described what it just basically is. Would you mind going into that really quick?
On your back, knees up, feet on the floor. The feet are about the width of your hip sockets, which are not your bone on the outside. It's not the greater trochanter. That's your femur bone. It's not the hip socket. So you find the hip socket at your pubis and then move up at an angle, and it's not very far up. And your finger will kind of drop into a little hollow. Don't press there, but it's where your major artery is. So you don't want to press that major artery, but that's your hip sockets, and your feet are basically lined up with that. And, during Zoom, because I couldn't help correct people, I found that if you put your knee, like you take one knee up and like point it towards the ceiling, so, and your foot's off the ground, and you let the lower leg kind of just hang or dangle, really make it light and kind of like you're just a wet noodle, just give it as much freedom. That opens the toes up that you're speaking to, how important they are. There's so many proprioceptors in the feet, right? And there's so much going on in the feet. And so you just let that, and then you drop the foot. You're almost always going to be in a really good alignment with your hip socket. It's fascinating. I don't know how I found that, but it did, and it worked really well. And then you do the other foot, and that will give you a sense of where your heel to your butt is, the distance. It gives you a more accurate distance. Interesting that letting go can actually help you find ground. It's not about just placement. And then, you just don't tuck the tail. So most people want to get in constructive rest. They want to lift their pelvis. They want to flatten their back. They want to try to be straighter. Remember that caterpillar. It needs all its curves, all its responsiveness. That spine has curves in it. We don't take the curves out. If somebody's taught you to tuck your tail, I would tuck my tail out of that class. If somebody teaches you to, lower your chin or lock your ribs down, that's all a mechanical model. This is the idea that if I correct you, you'll be okay, rather than, no, I want to actually wake up and be human and be on the earth. And so how do I do that? How do I come out of this haze of disorientation and show up here? And so, the proprioception is huge. So I don't lock anything. I just come in, I land, I see what bones are landed. And what spaces, what bones are floating. I'm not in a judgment. I'm just noticing, because that's where the cortex can be really perceptive. You can say, wow, look, I started this and I was here. And now 5 minutes later, I feel so much more connected. This feels good. So it gives meaning to what I'm doing. If you understood the meaning of hugging a tree to the person who's wants a good reason to do something rather than just play, who've lost their play instinct, then, this is what it does for you. And so sometimes we start with, like, I need meaning of why I'm going to allow myself to move in these ways, right? So that's the meaning of it. It means that over 5-10 minutes, you have landed more on the ground, not by pushing, but just by being present. Mm-hmm. And that landing is the skeletal system. And the bones are really informing us, because they're a whole system, just like the fascial system. When we look at muscles, they're not actually a system. They work more in relationship to each other, but there is relational pieces, but they don't work quite in the same way as the bones do. And bones are about being human, not about doing human. Mm-hmm. They don't care what you do. They just want you here on earth when you do it.
And they're really resilient, as you mentioned way before, where it's like people will show up and this is just their way of kind of preserving themselves, but they're still here. It's like the human body is so damn resilient. And that means that we can make change. We're adaptable. We're adaptable beings.
We are.
So how would you, from the CRP position, how would you go about hydrating and releasing or toning the psoas, if you can describe briefly? Because I know it's in the book and I know it's also on your courses, if you don't mind getting into that.
About releasing and toning more. I gave up the release word in the 80s because release means it's kind of fix it. I came out of a mechanical model too. It's like, we all come out of it because we're all trained in it. We literally look at the book and we say, here's my nose, here's my eyes, here's my toes, here's my hands. Is it a cute book? It is. My children read that book. But, we divide everything up, and we give it names. And, and that's a cultural conditioning. So now I don't think of it. I think of, I want a juicy psoas. So how would, like you said, and that involves hydration. So there's, it's in the breath, it's in the rhythm, it's in the allowing movement. When you look at a young child movement, you see fluid. You see how fluid they are. What happened to us? We dried out. Mm-hmm. Aging isn't drying. You're going to age. That's a for sure thing, but you don't have to dry out. So I use about a 7 to 10 inch inflatable ball. There's videos on my website. I play in water to hydrate, but in constructive rest, I start with just landing. And then if you want to play with the idea, sometimes it's easier to do in a bathtub, a shower. You can start this idea of how do I get my spine to be more responsive? And you could, in a shower, wrap your arms around yourself and lean just a little bit over and see if you can get, because when you're holding onto your arms, you're kind of more located in the spine. See if you can get your tail to your tongue to talk to each other. Okay. They actually, if you move your tail, your tongue should respond. And I know a lot of people that doesn't, but just play with it a little bit, and then in a bathtub, you can do the same thing. You can allow tail to tongue. And, I just want to bring how much power has to do with it. On YouTube, there's a man, Derek Stockton, who he and I got to work with each other. He had read my book, Psoas, and, anyways, we met. He was a power lifter, and he'd come out of the realm of bodybuilding, which is basically creating a look that you're strong, but not necessarily being functional. Mm-hmm. And powerlifting, the history of it, he told me, goes back into Russia. United States did a lot of research in power until they went into the heart rhythms and went into jazzercise and all the things that got aerobics, because we were having a lot of stress and we were having heart attacks. Mm-hmm. So it became the big research piece. But the power piece that when you track back in years comes out of a development of proprioception. That means you have good nerve responses in your body and they're accurate. And hydration provides that. So he would tell me, as a power lifter who's a 5'9" man, 180 pounds when he's powerlifting in his category. He was in his 40s when I met him. He could put 805 pounds on his shoulders, dumbbells, and squat lift. He won national awards, and he's the one who told me his psoas is juicy cucumbers. Not fully, but juicy cucumbers. And I would use him as a challenge to understanding strength, that it's about hydration. So he would get in the bathtub. He said every morning before he went to work, before he did coaching, he would get in a bathtub, a warm bathtub, and he would actually try to get his spine to move, and you can choose any ocean creature you want that knows how to undulate, and get his spine to move. Whether that's the centipede or the caterpillar or, the tubular creature, under the sea. But to get that response going, because that was how he hydrated his psoas. And I think that's a simple way of and a place that everybody can begin, because bone, its origins is the spinal cord origins and bone are both oceanic in their ancestral lineage. We were in the ocean before we emerged, and spine and bone come literally from the ocean. The earliest spinal creature is called a sea squirt. It's a tubular-looking creature, but it's actually a rudimentary spine. It's the beginning of a central nervous system. So if we could understand that our central nervous system, when we dry out and get hard, is literally changing our nervous system, our organs, our hormones, that's an important piece to understand. Mm-hmm. And we're tubular. So in Stalking Wild, there's an essay all about the tubular nature of our organism. So that's a good book for the essay pieces of trying to understand, what am I talking about when I'm saying biomorphic movement? Biomorphic movement is something we share with all life, whether it's a river. I think of our spine as a river. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should flow.
This is like the wetlands, and wetlands is where the fertile new life, it's a little slower rhythm. It's reading, not the fierceness of the river, but going out, and there's those little slower rhythms, but it's reading things. It's allowing the rhythms of the water to hold new life. It's where fish lay their eggs, and tadpoles are, and so it's like it's a restorative gesture, and it's a place of restoration, but also renewal. So I work with my body that way. I am renewing it. I am going in through restorative gestures that allow my system to show up more and more of who Liz is. Yeah.
So move your spine would be keeping it really, really simple. Try to move your spine as best as possible. And I was trying to actually move it while you were going through that. I don't know if you picked up on that. Now, what if it...
Bring your hands close to your body, because like if you're in constructive rest, for example, the next time you go into constructive rest, after you just land there, put your hands on your thighs and see if you can get your spine to do wave motions or lateral motions that don't involve your head moving much. That's called micro movements. Mm-hmm. When you work on micro movements, you're working on a level that's biomorphic, where all organisms, recapitulate. It's where we recapitulate. I'm working on the, mitochondria. I'm working on a level that is about composting, okay, and how things break down, but also regenerate, and when we're there, we're not on this just, escalator down to death, we're literally in a restorative capacity of the system. And in that way, I think we also show up here as humans, not as destructive, and able to actually recognize our kinship and our relationship with life. Mm. And that we are in that process with all living beings and living things, as we call them, whether that's a mountain or a river or an animal or a plant. And that's why I told you I like to liken psoas to slime mold, because it's one of the creatures that defies being defined. If you've ever seen slime mold, it's like, it's not a plant, it's not an animal, but, we try to call it something, and yet it moves, it learns. There's research on how slime mold learns, because there's research on the fact that we learn things without a brain. Critters who don't have brains are learning. So what are they doing? We have been told that if you don't have a brain and you don't have one like us, you're not as good. But that is not actually how life happens or life shows up. Mm-hmm. So we really have to kind of decolonize our thinking, mm-hmm. to access psoas in its true nature. We have to stop thinking that we're going to learn and control our body.
Yeah, and just be present.
Yes, we begin curious and play.
Yeah, it's funner that way anyway, too, instead of trying to overthink and manage and control absolutely everything.
Sure is.
So with the psoas being a messenger, as you said, people probably that are listening to this have never even either heard of their psoas muscle, depending on who it is, or they've certainly never felt it, because it's very deep, and I would say it's very subtle unless you are trying to manipulate it. Then you will feel it, especially if it's what some would consider short or tightened, or what would be actually dry. So what ways do you think that it's giving us these messages? So if someone's experiencing back pain, if someone's experiencing knee pain, or even if they have some issues with an organ like a gallbladder, do you feel like this can all be drawn back to the psoas, like your soul speaking to you? When you have a problem, if you internalize it, it's gonna manifest one way or another. But we can't hear our psoas unless you're digging deep. So do you believe that these are kind of reflections of us being diseased, dis-ease, like you're not at ease? Could this have something to do with your psoas?
Well, I would say that the way to think about psoas, I think of it, is like to reframe it as an organ of perception. So, organs, we rarely do things to, okay? We try not to do too much to our organs, right? Except nourish them, right? And But if your stomach's talking to you, you pay attention. You go, oh, I think I'm hungry, or God, I ate something that doesn't feel right, And if your kidneys start aching, you go, oh gosh, maybe I have an infection. Like that's how we use it. So that's the way to think about psoas. Don't try to dig in there and figure it out. Like pay attention. Pay attention to these little conversations you're having. Now, when you're in pain, it's very hard to sense something because you're overwhelmed by that pain, whatever degree it is. So it becomes the dominant messenger, but it too is a messenger. Okay. So the understanding of the reframing, because the only reason why psoas was put in the psoas box is because there was no connective tissue conversation and they didn't know what else to put it, right? But if we think of it as a muscle, we're going to want to get it to contract. We're going to get it to stretch. We're going to do all these manipulative things to it. But if we understand it more like an organ of perception, that it was reframed, that it doesn't fit in the mechanical model. It doesn't fit in a box. It cannot be defined. It's slime mold. I'm sorry, you're never going to find the right category for it. Then all of a sudden, there's kind of a mystery there. Life becomes a mystery, and we're curious. And when we turn towards ourselves and being curious, not trying to solve a problem, and I know when somebody's in pain, they just want to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, go fix it however you want, but don't attack the pelvis. Psoas, center the pelvis. Look for ways to block the pelvis so it's not torqued or twisted. Soften the muscles around the skeletal system so you're not twisting yourself out of shape. Do some hydrating work, some recovery work. Derek, you said there's some YouTube on some of his work, like he always did hydrating work before he power lifted and after. You want recovery. You can stress your system all you want, but you need restorative gestures. And when you're a little kid, couple minutes, hanging out on the floor, taking a nap, you're up and ready to go. And for many of us, it takes a little more time to go through a restorative gesture than when we were 4 years old. It's like we don't rebound as quick, but we've also really done a lot to ourselves to dry us out. So now, we're not as juicy. We can't rebound as quick. We've got to, have some recovery time. So those kind of rhythms is how you work with psoas rather than the do something to it mindset. Mm-hmm. It's a change in paradigm. It's a big change in paradigm. And if people, my website's Core Awareness, there's lots of articles that help you kind of transition. You can always reach out to me and ask me where to start. But there's post-recorded classes called Self-Care for Your Psoas. And that's a great place. It's a 2-hour class. I explain how to self-care for your psoas, and that's a beginning of, especially if you're in pain, because you don't want to create more injury or more harm when your nervous system can't read the situation because the pain is dominating the channel waves. You're not really, and that's creating a fear response as well as like you're in danger. To the wild animal, if they're in pain and injured and they're limping along, that's a big deal for the wild animal. We might just miss that step and fall down the stairs and hurt ourselves more. But to the wild animal, they're eating, their food for everybody else who needs lunch and needs to feed their babies. And so there's a lot of response in our animal body to this has got to, something's got to happen.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, I am going to have to definitely dive back into this one because I know there's just been so many little nuggets that I know aren't going to be received right now, but like a week or so from now, I'll be like, that's what you meant. Because as you were explaining some of this stuff, I visualized the body just going through your course is much different. Like it might sound dumb, but the way that you kind of put the triangles for the psoas and for the trap, I'm like, this is a different way to look at the body, and it kind of makes more intuitive sense, which I believe that the psoas actually has something to do with intuition as well.
Yes, sure does. Sure does. You just have to trust your intuition. And, so like, that's the schooling of, well, if we don't think this way, we must be dumb. But we know that the kids who love to move are not dumb. They're just in a different place. They're experiencing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an either or. So like you can, but it is more process oriented, not directional. And the organism and your psoas is global. So it's round. It's the size of your fist. And I tell people, if you can sense it like it's a hardcore, like, the Brooklyn Bridge, which most dancers have, or it's real muscular, but almost dry and muscular, or it feels really tenuous, not very big, it's kind of feels small. That's dryness. You're looking at a psoas that's been misused. So now you have to actually tend toward yourself rather than be angry with your psoas for being that way. You have to actually tend to it. You have to nourish it. You have to start recognizing that it's that restorative gestures that's going to plump it up. So I tell people that psoas senses, and you said it's really subtle. You're absolutely right. Don't go poking, looking for it. It's behind organs, behind major arteries. I get to see the people who've been injured by people poking and doing these things because they come and, say, I did this. Somebody gave me a psoas release and I bled into my, lungs and my, broke the artery. Yeah. Big things can happen when you go poking around. You have to be like, it's not a good idea. It's not common sense. But one of the things that you can come to as you keep exploring this is your intuition that you can begin to trust. So trusting your animal body, you could call intuition is not woo-woo, but actually it's your animal knowing. It's like you know things.
Yeah.
And that kind of intelligence cannot be controlled. Mother Nature cannot be controlled. We kind of all are experiencing how she's feeling about what's happening right now in the world. We can't control the weather and we're not controlling what's going to happen for human beings. It's out of our control. That's the vulnerability piece. But when we actually land and locate, that knowing, that keen awareness, those good instincts carry us through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what gives us a sense of safety.
I think Mother Nature really misses us and she's been calling us back. She wants her cubbies back so she can give us that sense of safety. She can give us that hug, that nourishing hug, but it's like we've just wandered off far too long and being called back now. So back to human.
Yep, back to human. I love it.
Yeah. Would you say that the psoas being off-center kind of messes with your intuition?
I think being off your axis, just what we started with, was this idea of a central place in which when you take a step, that pendulum motion, like the heart, we don't walk mechanically. We literally express ourselves like we have an impulse to move somewhere. So tracking your own impulses, we've been taught impulses are bad, like don't be impulsive. But we're talking, that's a dysregulated system. But the impulses that we have are so beautiful for the moment if we learn to do that. So when you were saying that moving through how you felt, how you moved through, and I'm not sure exactly what word you used, was beautiful. That idea, that relationship of spine to foot, that relationship of getting over ourselves, that relationship of axis in which our foot can roll, can really feel the ground, can rebound, that we feel. So all the diaphragm of the foot needs to be hydrated. The diaphragm is not a floor. There's no floors in the body. There's no rigidity in the body. We have a diaphragm. We have a respiratory diaphragm. We have a diaphragm in what we call the palate of our mouth. Some people call it the roof because we use, yes, those are domes.
Yeah,
those domes have rebound to them. When they're all dry and stuck and hard, we get abrasiveness in the joints rather than rebound. or eco-locators. There's an article on the eco-locators from, I think it's Massage and Bodywork, that was published for massage therapists and body workers on my website under the educational portion. There's just tremendous free information there for people to dive into if they want to start to explore their psoas. And yes, the Psoas book is a good primary book. I call it my brown bag book. It's for everybody. It's written in simple terms. It, kind of is easy. And there's nothing philosophical. It's, just really the functional pieces, but how those functional pieces are somewhat interrelated. I'm just hinting now at a more biodynamic process.
Yeah, I definitely love the book. I have it right here next to me. But very bite-sized, and I love how you mentioned the domes, because now my mind is racing and I'm trying to piece everything together. Well, what are domes for? They can be like arches. I see it as arches too, and they're kind of supportive. And what I really liked about some of the videos that I've gone through with you is you say that moving forward, like from the spine, it's a longing of the heart. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, another way that I kind of see this is that when people stop moving and they aren't walking as much, I kind of perceive it as them almost giving up, if that would make sense. So it's kind of sad to think about, but when I look at it that way, it's like, I don't want anyone to give up. And that's why I'm putting this type of stuff out there. So maybe people can see that there is another way to live this life. We're here. As you mentioned in the beginning, we've been disconnected, but we're here. So we got to be here. We got to be present. So
we came here for a reason.
Yeah.
So I'll say the last piece is, for me, is longing starts the moment the cell divides, and probably even before that. Okay, the longing to be here is something that we really have to take quite seriously. We really long to be here. Mm-hmm. And when Yap told the story of how, when the cell divides, that center goes into and longs to embed into our mother's womb. It's the first earth. It's the first connection to earth. And when we embed there, that placenta actually belongs to us. It actually is part of us. It's part of that, that cell. So that conversation through the navel, through that center that we started with, is where we begin to feel our connection and our longing and our impulse. And our birth story often distorts that. But it's actually, what's interesting about biomorphic movement is that when we start accessing, and I know it can seem like I have no idea how to begin. So begin in this idea, like you said, of breath. Even that interruption of breath starts the beginning of noticing other things. It's noticing that, wow, I don't exhale. Mm-hmm. So interruptions are really actually a way to stop what's called the insistence on homeostasis. And that's what you're saying, like people stop doing things because it's just too painful or too difficult. So for that, we're looking at how do we innovate? And, to innovate really actually takes the system further away from homeostasis. But the beginning is, where's the insistence? Where does it, like, no matter what, this just keeps coming up? And rather than kind of taking a chisel and trying to break it up, I think of domes as buoyant. I think of the resiliency of our system as being, where are we so dry that we can't feel that buoyancy? Where can we not feel that long inhale that is not something I have to do, but is actually who I am? That life breathes me. And I agree with you. It's in that we haven't exhaled. Mm-hmm. So I work with long exhales, because it's not about taking a deep breath. It's actually about taking a long exhale. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden this, the pause, if we pause, we'll feel ourselves being breathed. And once you do that, I think it brings inspiration back. I think it brings innovation back. It brings the system like kind of back online, back on earth. And maybe for the first time, because our journey here could have been really rough. And And with the medical model of birth, it is really, really rough. We have to realize we're medicated. Everybody's medicated. We're literally controlled by a top-down model that doesn't necessarily respect Mama Earth, you know? So coming full circle, getting on the ground, taking your shoes off, literally feeling the ground with your feet, you know, doing constructive rest if you live where it's spring and summer, outside, you know, put a blanket down and just land on the earth. Psoas will thank you for it.
I love it. Well, Liz, thank you so much. This was beautiful. My mind is definitely stirring. I would love to have you back on the show just to dive a little bit deeper, maybe into the morphic, because I don't truly understand that right now.
Stalking Wild Psoas is a good introduction to that, because there's essays there that explain what that means. You know, it starts to change the language. One of my passions is changing the language of body from being an object to being a living process.
I fully agree.
I think you do. Yeah.
Awesome. So I will post up the Core Awareness, your website. Do you have any workshops or anything that are coming up that you want to put out there?
No, but there's a lot of post-recorded classes because I'm moving and my schedule is kind of on hold right now. You know, I'm going to be in New York for privates and a basic workshop. But other than that, I'm basically kind of on hold till I make this shift. Yeah.
Well, I hope you have a safe and very efficient move over to California.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me, Liz. I was actually really giddy about this one. My heart was talking to me on this one. So
Glad you're listening.
yeah.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, love.
Bye.
I'll email you when this is out. Should be within 2 days.
Yeah. I'll share it. Yeah, I've got a large following, so I will.
Perfect.
You know, compared to a lot of people, but you know, I'm not an influencer, but I have a good following that will always love hearing podcasts. So I'll be turning them on to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. You're influencing the right people.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Have a great rest of your weekend. Happy Easter.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.